Dr. Lott, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Chairwoman Jackson-Lee, Ranking Member Briggs, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to speak to you all. I desperately want to do something to stop the horrific violence that Representative Lee and the other witnesses have so movingly described this morning. But I want to do something that actually matters. Unfortunately, many of the proposals won't help or will actually make matters worse. Take background checks on the private transfers of guns, known as universal background checks. There isn't one mass public shooting this century that would have been stopped if such a law had been in effect and had been perfectly enforced. Worse, no one is talking about the massive errors in the background check system and how it overwhelmingly discriminates against Black and Hispanic males being able to go and defend themselves and their families. We hear calls for bans of so-called assault weapons, but the vast majority of firearms in the United States, including these assault weapons, are semi-automatic guns that are functionally identical. Even the influential Associated Press style book acknowledged earlier this year that terms such as assault weapon and weapons of war convey, quote, little meaning, and, quote, are highly politicized, end quote. The AP makes it clear that these firearms are not used by any militaries around the world. Despite the references a couple times, they are not automatic weapons. President Biden has frequently said you only need an AR-15 to hunt deer if the deer have Kevlar vests. But an AR-15 functions exactly the same as any small caliber hunting rifle, firing the same bullets with the same rapidity and doing the exact same damage. Banning guns based on them looking like military weapons, the key phrase is often military style, makes no sense. Of course, banning all semi-automatic guns, as President Biden has repeatedly called for over the years, would mainly affect law-abiding citizens. While I guess at least is logically more consistent than banning military-style weapons, it would make it much more difficult for Americans to use guns defensively. If you want to ban all semi-automatic rifles, what's the alternative? A manually loaded gun, where you have to physically put another round in the chamber after you fire each shot? If you face multiple attackers, or you fire and miss, or you fire and wound but don't incapacitate the attacker, someone may not have the luxury of time of manually reloading the gun to be able to go and protect themselves. Claims about these laws having overwhelming support are based on surveys that simplify and mischaracterize what these laws do. Surveys show that when Americans are accurately informed about what these laws change, with strong support changes to strong opposition. There's 4 facts I'd like to try to get across. 1, over 92% of violent crime in America has nothing to do with firearms. That percent has remained fairly constant for the last couple decades. The vast majority of violent crime has nothing to do with firearms. The second point is, while the U.S. media doesn't give much attention, if any, to coverage of mass public shootings in other countries, mass public shootings per capita are relatively low in the United States compared to a number of countries in Europe, as well as the rest of the world. Over the 20 years from 1998 to 2017, the United States had 1.1% of the world's share of mass public shooters and 1.8% of the mass public shooting murders. Both are significantly less than the U.S.'s 4.6% share of the world population. People don't take into account that the United States has over 330 million people. You can't compare it to a country with 5 million or even Germany with 80 million without adjusting for the different sizes in population. Many of these countries with much higher mass public shooting rates and deaths have very strict gun control laws. The third fact is 94% of the mass public shootings occur in places where civilians are banned from having firearms. We've heard many times today about the Buffalo mass murderer earlier this year. If you read his manifesto, he spends a great deal of time, like many of these killers do, explaining why he picked the target that he did. I'll read it to you. His manifesto says, quote, attacking in a weapon-restricted area may decrease the chance of civilian backlash. schools, courts, or other areas where concealed carry are outlawed or prohibited may be good areas of attack. Areas with strict gun control laws are also great places for attack. I can give you quotes from one manifesto after another, from one diary after another, and they're on our website at crimeresearch.org, where these killers, time after time, tell you, but the media ignores the fact, never reports this part of what's in their manifestos. The fourth fact I'd like to get across is the most vulnerable people in our society benefit the most from owning guns. If my research convinces me of anything, there are two groups of people who benefit the most from being able to go and protect themselves. One are the people who are most likely victims of violent crime. That's overwhelmingly poor blacks who live in high crime urban areas. Police, anybody who's read my academic research knows that I think police are extremely important. But police understand themselves that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crime's occurred, and that raises the question of how people should act when they're having to confront a criminal by themselves. And the research shows overwhelmingly that by far the safest course of action for people to take is to have a gun. And that's particularly true for people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. You're almost always talking about a male criminal doing the attack, and when a man is attacking a woman, there's a much larger strength difference that exists there than when a man's attacking another man. We've heard a lot about different attacks that occurred this year.
Dr. Lott, can you finish? Will you be finishing soon?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. But if you go through the list, the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas was a gun-free zone. The Tulsa, Oklahoma hospital shooting was a gun-free zone. The Walmart mass murder in Virginia was a gun-free zone. I could go through others. But our research shows that overwhelmingly, when you see these attacks, they occur in schools where teachers and staff are not allowed to carry. It's not by accident. Thank you very much.